Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the channel. I'm your host, TKK. Thank you for tuning in. Tonight, we got a video talking about consoles and if they are really worth it and if they're good enough. Really, if they're good enough is really going to be the focus point of today's video. It's going to be a discussional video, and I want to go over to some different points, realistic points, things that I want you to inspect and examine. And we're going to do a versus in some perspective with like PC, just to give you a different type of narrative. Some of you may be strictly console gamers, never really dove into what it's like to play on PC, and vice versa, right? So today I'm going to roll my intro. We're going to get into the discussion. It's going to be a good discussion. If you got comments, I want you to be ready to discuss with me. All right, welcome back to the channel. Got an Xbox Series X, empty box. PlayStation 5, empty box. So I've recently purchased both of these consoles for two of my children. Right? Got a 16-year-old son, great kid, and I've got a 6-year-old son also, who's my junior. He's KJ. I wanted to put them in a position where they have their own stuff. I really don't like sharing my technology. The controllers, they get sticky. The kids use them, they just don't feel the same. So I invested and was able to get them both the consoles that I wanted them to have, right? Now, when you look at these, and picking back from the video that I posted maybe 2 or 3 videos ago, if you haven't seen it, check it out right there. Maybe you can pause this one, go take a look at that so you'll have a little bit more context as to some of the things that I said, because I'm going to reference at least one of the things that I said there into this video. When you look at this particular box, there's some advertisement around here. Feature set more so. You got 4K 120 frames per second. That's what FPS stands for. Okay. You see that? It's catchy. It's trending. You see that? You're like, man, I gotta have it. You have been programmed. I gotta have 4K at 120 frames per second without you even knowing what that means. Some people do not understand what a frame rate is. They don't understand the differences between 30, 24, being more theatrical, 30, right? Or 60 or 120 or even more. But they know that they see it. It's on the new consoles. It wasn't a part of the old consoles, so they gotta have it. You put this box down, and then we'll take a little bit of a look at the PlayStation 5, which goes even further. Sony tells you you've got 4K, you've got HDR, and you've got 8K. You've got 8K capabilities with this thing out of the box. If you look at this from an advertisement perspective, and I know we're living in some crazy times. We're living in a pandemic still, so these are not essentially grab and go items. It's not like it was in the 90s, the early 2000s, the late 80s, where you could just walk into a Toys R Us and you could see an abundance of a Nintendo Entertainment System or a Sega Dreamcast or a Sega Saturn, and you could just say, hey, yeah, I want that. I want to look at the box, and based on me seeing the box, I want that. However, they do have this advertised. And so without you knowing that HDR is high dynamic range, without you knowing that 4K is the actual resolution of UHD and that 120 is the actual frame rate, and without you knowing that 8K is a resolution that most people are not going to be able to take advantage of, you see these terms, you see this branding, and you get put in awe. You're like, man, this is the latest and greatest, and I've got to have it. Now, this video is going to have a little bit of depth to it. I can remember some years back, I was operations manager in a hospital, right? And so my direct reports, the supervisors, the team leads that reported to me that had their own employees, I had this phrase that I used with my leaders, right? It was to inspect what you expect, right? Literally, inspect what you expect, okay? And what that means is pretty much as the words sum it up. You want to take the time to examine what your reality is, what your perception is. Take the time to really fine tune and consider what it is that you expect to really happen. And so that's really what we're going to cover with this particular video. So we're going to pan back or pan forward and go and take a look at one of my setups and give a little bit deeper into this topic. All right, so without me being so melodramatic, when I said inspect what you expect, I want to just take a brief moment before I go to the main setup to show you right here. This is where my boys play. This TV panel right here is called the LG C9 OLED. This TV was produced and released April 2019, right? Consoles didn't come out until 2020 November. So this thing was definitely ahead of its time, okay? First TV to offer you 4K, 120 frames per second or 120 hertz through HDMI 2.1. Had 4 active HDMI 2.1 ports, right? TV has G-Sync compatibility, so sweet spot for PC gaming if you don't want screen tearing. The variable refresh rate technology and everything is all implemented in this. So when I said inspect what you expect, right? First thing we need to be doing when we're seeing advertisement and we're getting caught up in hype is just getting educated on what it is that we're really going after, okay? You see 4K 120, obviously you need to have a display that can do that, okay? Make sure the display is there and it's good. And if you buy the right display, we're in 2022. This TV is still being used actively. We've got over 12,000 hours. I think I posted a video on the page recently about that, where this thing has been turned on. So make sure the display is solid and make sure the display is right, and then you'll have a much better experience out the box. So let's go into the next room and we'll have some talking points. Okay, so what I want to do is just take a brief moment and talk to you about why this is even a video, right? I was actually sitting down in this chair last week, maybe a week and a half ago, and I'm gaming. I'm playing the PlayStation 5, and I'm thinking to myself, like, man, this Spider-Man game looks absolutely beautiful. And keeping in mind, I'm playing the remaster that was released on the PlayStation 4, the PlayStation 4 Pro, some years ago, 2018, 2017, it might have been. I'm not sure when the game came out originally, but I'm playing the remaster of that on PS5, and I'm like, man, I'm playing in the fidelity mode that gives me the 60 frames per second with the HDR on, and I'm on a 77-inch TV, and I'm just like, this is looking great. Really good, really crispy. And at that point, I was thinking to myself, like, these consoles ain't bad. They're not bad, right? They are not bad. Like, there's some quality that's coming out of this thing. Graphics looking good, sounds great, fluidity is there. So I'm feeling like, man, I really need to talk to the people, because I'm such a to the heart enthusiast with PC gaming and buying graphics cards and things like that. I thought I would be able to make a discussion as to offer some context and a better narrative as to what your expectations are when you are gaming on the console versus when you're gaming on a PC. So I'm actually going to fire up the Spider-Man game and talk about some of the settings, and then I'm going to go into a PC game and show you some similar settings. All right, had to fire up the PlayStation 5. We're going to get into some gameplay now. 77-inch C1 OLED. This was Pride and Joy of 2021. It's no stranger to the channel. Got a gaming PC, full 3090 build into this. So it kind of offers me a position I feel like I can rightfully speak to what you can expect out of both, right? Because I have a graphics card and I have had a gaming PC on a TV since 2019, since the C9 OLED. So I'm gonna fire up Spider-Man. As I said, I was playing this game a week and a half, 2 weeks ago, and I was just like, damn, this is actually decent, you know? So I've actually done a video of this before, kind of talking about some of the settings, and I was a little disappointed that you don't have the ability to get 60 frames per second with all the bells and whistles. Like, you can't get, there's not a max settings option for you, right? And when we dive into some of the settings on this game, again, I've covered this in a previous video, you got graphics mode, and it kind of gives you a breakdown, tells you, you know, what you can do. 60 frames has definitely got to be what you want to play with. Now, I do actually love to see games rendered natively in the highest resolution that they can be in, but that's just not something you're going to get with PC. I mean, with consoles. Almost always, if the game is a single player game like a Spider-Man, like a Halo, like an Assassin's Creed, I don't care what the game is, who manufactured it, whether it was Sony, third party, or whomever. I'm just saying Sony as a reference. It can be the same with Microsoft. There's going to be some type of upscaling technique put in place if there's a native resolution being ran, or in certain parts of the game, it's not going to run fully at that resolution, right? But the point of this video is it good enough? So I was playing this thing on the Performance RT, and it says this is an alternate version of the 60 frame per second performance mode, adding ray tracing by adjusting the scene resolution, reflection quality, and the density, right? And I was just, man, I'm playing this thing and I was just like, dang, it's smooth, it looks good.
It's seen better days.
I mean,
I think I can repair it at the lab.
like, dude, okay, so I'm recording this in 4K at 30, right? But even just me getting up, when by the way, if you have an OLED, it doesn't matter what angle you're at, this thing looks flawless. But looking at the water, looking at the shadows on Spider-Man, looking at just everything, this looks amazing, right? Like, we are to a point with consoles where they are actually good enough. I'm talking about for the biggest of a quality whore like myself, who absolutely loves to PC game with max settings, and we're going to take a look at that. This actually looks great. It really does look great, man. I mean, even looking at the structure of this building, right? Like, there's some detail. There's reflections. This glass right here, this is giving me a mirror reflection of the smog that's on the opposite building. This is next generation stuff. Like, it doesn't matter if you're playing on the PlayStation or if you're playing on the Xbox, you should really be impressed and happy that you are a console gamer now, because it's come so far. I did not get this out of the last generation. I had already transitioned over to PC, right? Done enough research, and I was disappointed with there not being enough games that just made my mouth water, right? But this is really impressive. I'm gonna pan forward to some PC settings and we'll talk some more. All right, man, so this piece of the video is going to focus more on what I'm gonna call the master race. Why do we like playing on PC so much? Let me just tell you that I've been PC gaming for quite a while, long time, man, long time. I think I got my first taste back in '89 with Prince of Persia. I think that was the first title that I can recall playing. And it's just, I don't know, man. I can remember even back then, it was just like, it looked so sharp, you know, with the VGA display. So this is Days Gone, right? Days Gone, figure I use this as a reference, was another PlayStation exclusive that they kind of ported over to PC. And I think that's been a very, very intelligent decision by someone at Sony to do that, because I know that they have sold consoles to people that were exclusively playing on PC because of that. Got the new God of War coming out, Ragnarok. It's only going to be on PS5, right? So anyone that's loving the God of War game for the first time like me on PC, they went out and bought a PS5 because of that. You got the Horizon sequel coming out this month, right? Only going to be on a PS5. It just recently, months ago, came out on PC. Same thing with this game, even though there's not a follow-up. But let's start by going to options. Like, if you can just focus on this. So what you get with PC that you don't get with console, like we're not to that point with console, is your ability to adjust the settings, okay? You can really dive into what is possible, right? So to begin, you got your resolution, your frame rate. Look, I'm all the way at 23.9, 24 frames. You never want to play a video game at 24 frames. Like, that's Blu-ray movie, you know, frequency, right? So you have the ability to take this thing all the way up to what the display can do. This panel does do 120 hertz. I have a active HDMI 2.1 cable going from the PC to the TV, and so I can refresh at 120 hertz. I don't have to have VSync turned on because the panel has G-Sync. Again, what I said earlier, or middle of the video, inspect what you expect, right? You have to actually understand that your technology matches what it is that you're trying to get. You can't just buy a box that say, hey, it can do 4K 120 without you having a display that can do 4K 120, right? So have to be responsible for managing your expectations. Going a little bit further, HDR obviously stands for high dynamic range. The display can obviously do that. If you know about this TV, you know it can do that. So we'll apply that piece. But going over to the graphics settings, you got presets, right? I pretty much set my stuff at very high. I don't know why it was at custom, but I like to turn everything up. Everything needs to be turned up. Now you can turn this thing all the way down to low. And what you'll notice, I'm not sure if you'll be able to see it, but even if as I'm managing this, you can look at the shadows, the reflections, right? Like as I go from medium to high, you'll see more grain and, you know, this changes here. You start seeing dirt. If I'm on medium, I don't have any dirt. If I'm on high, I have dirt. If I go to very high, man, I got extra details. You know, there's extra shadows and things like that, right? I like to play on what's called max settings. This is max settings, the highest graphical fidelity, the highest frame rate, the highest resolution that you can possibly have. No compromises. I want to play on that. Now, whether or not I'm always going to get that, can't say that for sure, because this game tells me right now that I am running at 113 frames per second consistent. I set it to be 120. I can't achieve 120 at these settings, but I have the ability to do so. Now, there are settings in PC, depending on the graphics card you have, and I'm covering this in my PC talk video that actually released the other day. So when you see this, go back and check that out. I got a 2-part series for that. And one of the things I talked about was the deep learning super sample for PC NVIDIA cards. What that does is essentially the same thing that I showed you in this video with the Spider-Man. It makes the game run at a lower internal resolution, but it upscales it to a higher resolution. So like the presets in the Spider-Man told you, you can either have it running native at 30 frames per second or close to native, or you can have it upscaled and get 60 frames per second. That's what the deep learning super sample. So PC does the same exact thing, right? It's just that for me, I like to spin to make sure that I'm getting the most out of it. I'm not concerned about achieving the highest frame rate, but I want to know that when I'm looking at a big, beautiful display, that I'm seeing the absolute best. All right, so we're going to close this out, and I want to tell you right now, I appreciate you, man. If you're subscribed to me, thank you. We just hit 3K. Actually, as of me recording this, I'm $29.99. So hopefully, if you're not subscribed and you see this, you will subscribe. I do my best to give organic and honest documentation and conversation about these products. But to close this out, man, I just want to say that these consoles are good. These is great value, 500 bucks. When you think about it, years ago, when you bought the original Xbox, which I did, not the original Xbox, but the original Xbox One, it's 500 bucks. A few years after that, you bought the Xbox Series X, 500 bucks. Or the Project Scorpio, 500 bucks. Here we are now, Xbox Series X, $500. You're getting so much more, right? And although I didn't use this as a reference, I do understand that this is physically stronger. What sparked the conversation of this video was the PlayStation 5. So I'm not picking green or blue side. This is not that. I'm just saying that if you bought either of these consoles, you have great value, amazing value. These consoles have the ability to, you know, stream gameplay, to create content, to give you 4K at 120 frames per second. If the developer has so deemed it worthy or able to do so, all games are not going to do that. You got to inspect what you expect, but they both have my seal of approval. I have bought this console twice and this console twice. I have my own Xbox and PlayStation. My two sons that live with me have their own Xbox and PlayStation. If you have any questions, let me know. If you have anything to add to the discussion, think I could have did something better, think the video should have been longer, should have been shorter, could have went in a different direction on my talking points, leave it in the comments. I love to hear about it. Love to have a dialogue. I appreciate the support. Please like, share, subscribe. And as I always say, max love.